Hey, everybody, welcome to the live feed. I decided to live record my podcast, and I just realized that these giant glasses give a huge glare. Oh, well. I hope that is the thumbnail for this image, like me squinting at the screen. Anyway, thanks for joining the live stream today. This is going to be kind of like a Homestead update episode where I live record the podcast. I'll take Q&A after. And if you want to get a question in, people on the live stream, just put the first couple words in all caps. I'll star it. That means you want me to go back through and make a comment about it. And we'll do that after the podcast. There will be an uncomfortable pause before I start the podcast and an uncomfortable pause after I finish the podcast, only because that way I can see on the audio file where to cut the stuff, because I don't include the Q&A in the podcast. That's the benefit of y'all getting here live on YouTube. If you like what you've been seeing from me on YouTube, go ahead, give me a subscribe and hit the bell button so you're notified when additional live streams come to be. And if you think this is some information that your friends might be interested in, loop them in either to the audio podcast, Living Free in Tennessee, on every podcatcher, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com to look at episodes, or shoot them to the YouTube or the Odyssey channel. Those channels are linked in the show notes that will come out after I'm done recording this. But I am Nicole Sauce, and it's Living Free on Tennessee is the channel on Odyssey as well, if you want to get yourself out of the tech giant matrix. I'm voguing now. Anyway, so we're going to hop in. Today we're going to talk about Homestead Bootcamp. You may wonder what that is. It is what it is. So I'm going to do this thing where I get to, wait a minute. Okay. Anyway, I learned how to play music on this before I go and I record. And it's like, it takes me a second to remember how to do it. So without further ado, I will do a 5-second pause. We will start. And just remember, folks, in the live stream, first couple words in all caps if you want me to star them and comment to them later.
The place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, August 15th. Oh, it's going to loop twice. We're starting over. You know what I would like on StreamYard is that when you have something in the audio, you can default it to only play this once. Otherwise, we get it over and over and over. That's what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go back. We're going to start over again. And I'm going to turn off the little loop thing. It's off now. It will stop playing over and over. But you're going to have to listen to the jingle yet one more time. Okay, we're giving a 5-second pause again. This means I have to edit twice because I'm going to be like, was it this one or was it that one?
The place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, August 15th, 2022. This is episode 607 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it is a Monday show. I'm recording this live, so we've got people interacting with me on comments on YouTube. I do not have Odyssey up for the Odyssey people. It's only because I haven't figured out how to manage 20 things at one time, but I'm going to get that solved. That is my goal. I may actually move from StreamYard to another streaming service to see if I can get all the comments in. I'm going to talk to Rebecca. Rebecca is somebody she was the lady who was responsible for being able to live stream Self-Reliance Festival last time. So that lady knows a lot about integrating Zoom, integrating multiple systems. And she uses something besides StreamYard to manage multiple feeds. And I think the system she uses is a little bit better. It costs a little bit more money, of course, but I really would like to be able to comment back and forth with people on these who are investing in these other platforms. Of course, we are streaming today on YouTube and Odyssey. Anyway, we have a big thing happening this week at the Holler Homestead. We have a couple big things happening at the Holler Homestead. And we are welcoming our first Homestead Bootcamp person, student, participant, experimental person. I don't know what to call her, but she is coming in today at noon. And that's part of why I decided to just go live at 9:30, a little bit earlier than usual. Actually, a lot of y'all are online at 9:30 anyway. So I thought, why not? I got up super early, did a bunch of chores, did my podcast notes. We're ready to go. So we're going to be talking about what we've been doing to get ready for our first round of Homestead Bootcamp. And I'm going to kind of cover with how it even came to be, what we did to prepare, and what the next few days look like in case any of you all decide you want to do Homestead Bootcamp. Does this sound like I'm looking for participants? I actually mean in case you want to do one at your homestead. Like both sides of that equation. This is something that when the idea came, I thought, we have so many people wanting to learn how to do so many things. Let's talk about what a good Homestead Bootcamp could look like so that other people can model it. And will we take more people here over time? Possibly. Will some of you say, you know what, I have a homestead and I can show people stuff? Possibly. This could become a thing, I think, that really helps people in our network who are maybe thinking or dreaming about living on the land and haven't really done much with it. Maybe they've gone through to a couple of classes, have a better grasp of what's going on, right? So I'm actually super excited about this as an experiment. The person who's coming was the impetus for the idea. And it just happened to work out that base camp isn't in a longer term rental until September. So we did it in August. So she has somewhere to stay that's not in my house and it's nice and comfortable. So that also worked out really well, but we'll see how this develops over time. Cause this is just sort of like sometimes the universe gives you an opportunity and an idea, and it's up to you to decide, do I take advantage of this opportunity or not? Sometimes the answer is it's a better idea not to do all of the opportunities at one time. So you can do some of the opportunities well. But this just happened to hit at a time when I'm transitioning out of some of the stuff I've done in the past that take a lot of my time. I'm referring and looping in vendors I've worked with for years on websites, for example. So when somebody contacts me for a website, I've been just connecting them and kind of helping with the process of getting the content of your website planned, which is actually I think it's more important than figuring out the build. I do. And, that's like getting what's the most important stuff to have on the website? How do you explain what you do in terms of what I care about as the visitor to the website, that sort of stuff. If you have that in hand when you go to a web developer, you're going to get a much faster and better experience than if you're like, so I need a website. Scratch, right? If you do that, it tends to take longer because they're often, what happens is they build like a wireframe and then they're like, so I need the content. And then 6 months later, you're still writing your content. And then eventually they get your content and they're like, so the wireframe doesn't work now because your content is totally different than what we talked about, but that's okay. So then they redo the wireframe. And then you build the site from there. I think it's important to get your basic content for your website done. In fact, now that I've said it out loud, members, I'm going to upload my questionnaire that I start with for people who hire me to do their website, that I require before I will build anything. And the reason I do that is I realize that first step of a wireframe is a complete waste of time until I have some content. And even then there's more content to write after that, but at least you have the basics in hand. Okay. I also wanted I'm going to start getting better about communicating what in the world we're doing, because I realize there's a lot of confusion about what's going on with events, with content, with live streams, with all of this stuff. And it does all, like, if you're paying attention all the time, you totally know what's going on. Do any of us actually pay attention all the time? I know I don't. Sometimes I don't know what's going on with me. Like, how can you know? So I want to be a little bit better about telegraphing what the future will bring. It's Monday. This is what the future will bring. On Wednesday at 12:30 p.m., I'm doing a live stream with Billy Bond and John Willis for the Wednesday Live. And that will be on YouTube. For my YouTube, it'll be on the SOE YouTube, and that will be on Billy Bond's YouTube probably. That's what we did last time. And so none of the alts, because I can only stream to 3 places at once, and those are the 3. And that's one where you can show up and ask us anything. I've put out an email this morning to both of them to say, are there any particular like current events or other things we want to talk about? Just stay tuned to the description. If you go to livingfreeintennessee.com/live, it is highlighting what the next live is most of the time when I remember to update it, which I have decided I will be better about. So if you go there right now, it has this live, right? So you can get there and go like, okay, I see what's up. And then Homestead Happenings, which we record every Friday at 9:30 in the morning, Central Time, is not being recorded Friday at 9:30. Why? Because I think I told y'all last week, I'm going on a vacation. And the vacation is in Maine. And Maine is far, far, far away from Tennessee. So I'm hopping in a car probably before the sun even comes up. I don't even know. I'm hopping in a car with some friends. They're gonna swing through here, pick me up, and we're driving to Maine. It's a several day drive. I don't want to try to live stream from the car going through Virginia where the network isn't that great. So I decided what I usually do in that situation is run an interview show and then just whatever, I'll Homestead update whenever. But if I don't do the Homestead update this week, there also will not be one next week. And then it's like how many weeks out? And a lot of you have been emailing me saying how valuable you find that episode because it gives you a true picture of what it's like to be managing a homestead while running a business from your home and all those other things, building the life I choose on my terms, right? So what that means is that I'm going to change the day this week of the Homestead update so we can catch you up. Plus, a ton is happening this week. Even after I tell you about Homestead Bootcamp today, there's going to be a ton of stuff going on because we added animals. I know you're only supposed to add one kind of animal per year. Yeah, but we needed LGDs. So I'm going to talk to you about how harrowing and frightening and difficult that was on the Homestead update Thursday instead of Friday at 9:30 Central Time. Join me then. You can, we'll do a Holler Neighbor live stream right afterwards like we do. So I'll see you Thursday for that. Okay. One more thing before we jump into our first segment of today's show. And that is just a reminder. I am doing a food forest installation workshop here, October 28th and 29th at the Holler Homestead. I'm in Lancaster, Tennessee. That's 1 hour east of Nashville. So if you're flying in, you fly into the Nashville airport. Tickets went on sale last weekend. We have a few seats left. That's at livingfreeintennessee.com. Very first post on the page is the post about what that class covers. Nick Ferguson is teaching it. It's going to be a really great class. We are also laying water lines to change my house from depending on electricity to feed water to gravity feeding water to the house, which is the first step towards peeling me a little bit more off of the grid. So Sean Mills came out years ago and we made this big picture plan to reduce my dependence on the energy grid. The first thing we did was install a solar water heater, and that has been fan-freaking-tastic. I'm using it right now. The second step was to get my house gravity fed from water, not necessarily at 60 psi, which would require a water tower here, or like a way up the hill on somebody else's property storage tank, because my water source is at the bottom of the hill and my house is halfway up the hill. But just enough so that if the power is out, I have enough gravity-fed water to wash hands pretty easily, which is better than just a bowl of water, which is what I use now. And it refills the toilets if I flush them, which means I don't have to run out to the outhouse to go number 2. Like, there are lots of good reasons. So we are laying the pipe for that as part of the Food Forest install. Sean Mills will be at that event, and I'm going to ask him to speak on sort of the big picture plan here and what the gravity-fed system is. And then he has all sorts of function stacking ideas, like more like redundancies of ways to replenish the water up the hill above my house, like, for example, off my roof, just to make me even more resilient. And what we've been doing is adding layers of resilience here that make sense and don't cost $100,000, right? I could put a huge solar array on my roof. That's going to cost a lot of money. Plus, I need 15 grand or so in battery bank, maybe 10 grand. It depends. I would actually tend to opt towards the buy once, cry once on technology. Like, sure, I can do a battery array with old golf cart batteries. And I was going to do that at one point, or I could just wait and get the battery array I want that's more likely to last a long time. But like, that's a huge step, and that's a big expense. Running the water, I'll share the price for y'all when we get there. The storage tank is expensive, but I can use IBC totes first and then find the storage tank, right? Perfectly acceptable. Just need to keep them from getting hit with the light so they don't develop algae. And then that sets the framework infrastructure wise, and I have to buy all the hose, right, from bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. That sets the stage for two things. One, I can then have multiple fill options. Two, I'm laying extra pipes so that I can eventually put in geothermal cooling because I have access to 55-degree water in a fairly large volume at the bottom of my hill, which means I don't have to then drill a big giant hole right at my house because I can pump that up, right? So there's some other things that relate. And so what we're going to do while the ground is open is lay a number of pipes so it will increase the cost of the project just so I have flexibility. Or if my water pipe fails one day, I have another one I can switch to, right? There's lots of, like, while the ground is open, that's when you do things. And that's happening October 28th, 29th. Tickets are at livingfreeintennessee.com. It's the first post on the page right now. It will move over into the sidebar of events later today when I get the podcast all posted up. If you want to email me a frugality tip, a question, a stump the sauce question. I got stumped twice last month. It was kind of funny. Or anything else of that nature, like, hey, I'm concerned about this thing going on, or I have a question about stuff. I get a lot of questions about relocating. I need to do another relocation roundtable for y'all who want to move here to talk to each other. You can do that, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact, and then fill out that form. Those go to me as well. Starting Thursday, there's no answer until after the 28th. So just know that, like, I'm actually leaving next week and not looking at email and nothing, like leaving come what may. With that, it's time for the first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And the word is getting out that there may be global food shortages. And there is this thing with Ukraine that's saying, well, the Russian grain's not going to be on the market. And then there's crop failures and right. And a lot of people have come to our community when they start hearing this because they're like, oh, wait, maybe I should, like, I don't know, think about having some things on hand. That's good. And the first thing people look at storing are freeze-dried foods, beans, and rice. Okay. Do you eat freeze-dried foods, beans, and rice? If you do, cool. If you don't, and you're doing it as a hedge against the rumor of food shortages coming, I'm not going to fault you for it at this point, especially if you have nothing stored at all. But imagine a world where what you store is what you eat on a daily basis. And imagine getting that in place for yourself so that you first have a week extra food, and then you have a month's extra food, and then you have 6 months extra food. Imagine what that could be like and how that would empower you if you, I don't know, lost your job and couldn't afford food for a little while, or there were some shortages of this or that here or there. Imagine how that could be. That's why we have this segment today. Now, I'm talking to you from the perspective of a homesteader. I've taken food storage and one more step from what I just talked about, which is developing a deep pantry, into refilling the deep pantry through work I do on my homestead. Not everybody has that option, but everybody can grow something. You can grow herbs on your windowsill and not have to buy, fresh rosemary at the store, for example, or fresh basil at the store. It's really easy to grow basil all year long inside with just like access to light. And as long as it doesn't get too cold, basil grows in a few weeks, like 5 weeks, I think, 4 or 5 weeks till I have a little early access to it. It takes nutrients and that sort of thing. So that's taking it to the next level. But if where you are is starting right now and you looked at like the Prepper Fear ads on Facebook that are like, you can get 2 years of freeze-dried food for X dollars. If you bought that, I highly recommend that you look at what you got and once a week, open something and eat it. Just start trying it. Figure out how to cook with that. Because if you ever need that, I wouldn't want to be learning how to eat that and make it palatable from the get-go. And it may, like some stuff is palatable. I have freeze-dried foods here. I use freeze-dried foods in my day-to-day cooking. But definitely if you've done that, do that. If you've done the storage of dry beans and rice, have you ever cooked dry beans and rice? Do you know how to cook them? Your next step is learn how to cook that and make it flavorful, which means you're going to add salt and maybe some fat and some spices, and maybe you want tomatoes in there. You see, you start seeing, oh, okay, so I have beans and rice, but I want to add tomatoes and beef. Okay, are you storing tomatoes and beef? That's what this section is all about. So here's where we're at on the homestead this year. It's been hard to grow green beans. Everybody I know in the area is like, yeah, the green bean crop wasn't so great this year. I've seeded some new rounds. As of this week, my goal is 50 jars. And when you've been home canning food for a long time, you end up with these like crazy numbers that freak people out. Like if I can 50 jars of green beans a year, I have enough to feed people green beans at my events. I have enough for all of us to eat green beans, and we're good to go. I got 36 jars as of this weekend. So we bumped up by 22 jars. And that was because I was at the farmer's market and I saw green beans, and there weren't very many. And I was like, just how much for the rest of them? And both farmers told me a price. They did not discount the price at all from what it would be from a small basket at a time, because green beans are hard to come by. I, knowing how much we like to eat green beans in the winter, decided to spend $40 on this project. Means it's about $2 a jar. I don't usually spend $2 a jar on green beans, but I figured it was worth $40 to just have that done. I still am getting green beans off my garden. I'm canning 1 or 2 jars a week, and hopefully the next 2 rounds of them, because I have 2 more rows planted that are 2 weeks apart. Hopefully that will get us up to 50. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. That is life. Like, I'm not going to get as many jars of salsa this year as I want either. I did 7 jars of salsa this week off my tomatoes. I had to buy some jalapeno peppers because my jalapeno peppers are still not ripe, which means I have 14 jars of salsa. We usually go through 30 jars of salsa. We're about halfway there. I'm looking out my window at the tomatoes. We might get another 7 jars off of that. And then that does not include stewed tomatoes that I usually store or tomato sauce. I did have unused tomato sauce last year, so we should be fine. And again, if it's not growing or being canned here, we're just not going to have it. We'll eat something else. I really like to add tomato to roasts and stews in the winter. We'll see what happens. I'm going to do the best I can. Yesterday was crazy train day. Absolutely nuts. Nothing went as planned yesterday. Like, the only thing that went as planned was from when I got up in the morning till 9 a.m. That's the only thing that went as planned. Starting at 9 a.m. until 9 p.m., it was a cluster. But I did manage to get all my canning done. And I kind of knew it was going to be a cluster. And this is what you do when you know it's going to be a cluster. You think about dinner at 6 in the morning. Yeah. So at 6 in the morning, I got up and I had a defrosted brisket. Brisket. And I have an electric smoker. So that was cool. I didn't have to throw it in the crock pot. And I did a nice rub on the brisket and put it in the smoker and hit go with some wood chips. That saved my bacon for dinner last night, and we had delicious brisket. It's so easy. So things like brisket online, when you read how to cook them, are very complicated. There's lots of rules, minimum amount of time to cook them, this temperature or that temperature, arguments. It's a hunk of beef that gets tender if you cook it low and slow. So if you do not have a smoker, but you have a crock pot, sin against brisket. You can put it in your crock pot. It's fine. If you want to have a little bit of smoky flavor, then you smoke it on the grill. If you have like a charcoal grill, you add some hickory in there or something. smoke it on the grill for a bit, couple hours or an hour or something, not too hot. Then you throw it in the crock pot. It'll taste delicious. If it's not smoked and you throw it in the crock pot with a little bit of cumin, garlic, pepper, rosemary, it'll taste delicious. You can do so many things with it, but slow and low. That's all you need to know. So that worked out well. Don't overcomplicate things like that, guys. I'm probably going to start a series on how to cook parts of the cow that you get when you buy a whole cow that people don't know how to cook. I've already done a tongue cooking episode on YouTube, a series for that. But I realized when I was cooking a rib steak and there was something else. It was nothing crazy. It was like neck bones or something. I was like, people don't know how to cook neck bones, do they? And when you buy a whole cow, you get neck bones, especially if you ask for them. And you should totally ask for them because that meat is delicious. But what happens when people get whole animals is they eat the steaks, they eat the ground, they eat the roasts. They might cook the brisket, but they're a little scared of it. Like I have a friend who's scared to cook the brisket. And so I always cook her brisket low and slow. That's all you got to know. Low and slow is all you got to know. Right? It's a tough, lean piece of meat. I thought, I'm cooking these neck bones for dinner because that's what came out of the freezer. I literally just, beef, grabbed it. And I was like, I'm cooking neck bones. That's kind of how that went. And I was like, we need to do a series because if we overcomplicate this, then we make this lifestyle hard. And if you're going to have beef and only eat the roast and the steak and the ground, you're going to end up with a lot of extra pieces that just sit in your freezer and go bad, and that's a waste. You might as well learn how to cook them and decide if you think they're delicious, and then if not, give them to somebody who does. But they are delicious. The tongue is delicious. People have a mental thing about eating tongue. It's literally just, it's a lean muscle. It's not an organ. It doesn't taste like kidney or something. It's delicious, especially if you do it right. And it's very easy to cook. But if you can't get over that, give the tongue to somebody who likes it. And then neck bones, low and slow again. It's like perfect crock pot meal. Boof. And you're just like you're pulling meat off funny shaped bones when you eat it. That's the only thing. I've given away all my beef cooking secrets now. We're doing a round of homemade tomato basil soup today because it's in season. And I've got a bunch of tomatoes I didn't make into salsa yesterday. I've got basil coming off the garden. We have Homestead Bootcamp in town, and I'm hoping she likes tomato soup, so it's always good to have some extra things that are a little out of the norm for our eating. And I already had done one round of tomato soup, and it was delicious. I really liked it. I ate it all week. A little bit went bad because I was an idiot and left it out on my counter. But the way I make that is I puree the tomatoes, and if you can peel them first, that's great. If you can't, then whatever. You blend them or put them in your food processor with garlic, onions, and basil. And then you simmer it. You can add broth if you want to. I will add bouillon sometimes. Just depends on the flavor profile you want. You don't have to. And then you can add any other herb, like rosemary is actually pretty good in that too. But I try to, when I do the basil combo, I just leave it as basil. And then you have to decide, do you want creamy tomato soup or not? Because it's like a bisque. So you can add heavy whipping cream or sour cream at the end. Or if you have a neighbor who's allergic to all the things, then you don't add the dairy so they don't get sick when they eat it. It's a win-win. But it's a really great summer soup. You can serve it cold. It's actually not bad cold once you turn off your brain about tomato soup has to be hot. And it's delicious. It's a great side meal. Or if you want to make it into a more hearty thing, you can add chunks of stew meat to it, like pre-cook them and throw them in there. Tactical was throwing like taco meat in his last time I made it because he likes to have meat with his stuff. So Storage Challenge 22 is underway. How does this relate to the pantry? Well, if you're storing what you use and using what you store and you are not staying organized about this, you end up in a pickle. And I'm not quite in a pickle, but I am in a pickle where I don't have places to put all my jars. So I'm starting to store cases of jars under my bed. That's my creative solution. And I bought a bunch of stuff for base camp, and it came in all these cardboard boxes. And I decided to issue a challenge to myself because after living here 15 years, as you can imagine, there's a number of extra things I probably haven't used in a while. Trust me, there are. Happens to us all. And you get busy and you don't want to sort through it. Well, I now have a pile of boxes outside my front door that are empty. And my goal is that all those boxes will be full and it's going away. So that's my storage challenge of 2022. I highly recommend purging once in a while. I'm going through a purging cycle right now and selling some stuff and mostly just giving it away so that the things I have are the things we use here. Because what I've realized doing homesteading for a long time is you have a tendency to accumulate stuff when you do a project, like canning stuff or fermenting stuff, or you use this crock, but you don't use it anymore. And now you use that crock, right? So there's all these things that come up in your life. And it was kind of sparked by Strong Roots Resources is doing a monthly homesteader, like swap meet sort of thing, where you can get rid of stuff and then accumulate stuff that you do want. Love that idea. And I started looking around when he did that. I sent some stuff out with a friend. I was like, there's a lot of, like, I have a crock I never use that can go. I'm never going to use it. Even in a post-apocalyptic world, the 3-gallon, I think it is, or 4-gallon crock that I have, it'll fit a lot of cucumbers and it'll ferment all those cucumbers. And I still tend to do smaller volume because we eat smaller volume of that sort of stuff. So it's just this crock that I try not to break, that I move from place to place to place. Well, why keep it? I think the last time I used it was 2 years ago. Somebody else who loves to ferment the things is going to want my crock and my weight piece of wood. So stuff like that I'm selling. And then I went through the junk drawer. My junk drawer is 15 years old. Do you know what a 15-year-old junk? I don't even know what some of this stuff goes to. It was kind of organized. 50% reduction in the junk drawer, and now I know what's in it, and it's actually things I access all the time, and everything else went. So I'm doing pretty well at filling the boxes. There are some big boxes out there, and I'm probably gonna address my blanket hoarding problem. I don't like getting rid of blankets if they're still good, because blankets are great when it's cold. So I need to assess how many of those I'm going to actually keep. So purging season. And as I said, my challenge to myself was I took a week worth of boxes in a week where we got a ton of stuff because I was outfitting the Airbnb next door. And I'm going to fill those with stuff from here and let it go. Let it go. Next segment is the frugality tip. This comes from y'all. Y'all have been sending me great frugality tips. If you want to get one in, just shoot it to me via email. Please do not text me on Telegram, on MeWe, or anywhere else and expect I will remember we had that discussion. I won't, unless it's email. I just will not remember it. I will have it. I will say I'm going to follow up, and then I will forget, because my system is to clear my inbox. So if you want me to have a chance of following up with you, yes, I get a lot of email. Way better than hitting me up on Telegram and asking me questions. Just throwing that out there, because a lot of y'all have been hitting me up on Telegram and asking questions, and I answer them sometimes. And then I'm like, I'm getting overwhelmed with text messages. I'm not getting my stuff done. And then I forget we ever talked, and there's no way for me to have a reminder that I haven't answered this thing yet. So frugality tips need to come via email, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com, or with the contact form on my website. This one comes from Anna. And this was a good one. I hadn't thought of this one, and I might do it here. We'll see. I have a tip on how to stretch your dishwashing liquid. This is cut down on the amount I buy to 1 large bottle or 2 medium bottles every year. I can't even imagine what that's like. Only 1 bottle a year. I use a lot of soap here. I take an old wine or other see-through bottle and wash it thoroughly, fill 2/3 of the way with water, and then 1/3 with dishwashing liquid. Top the bottle with like a spout that you use for pouring salad dressing or oil out of a bottle. And then I use that for doing my dishes. When refilling the bottle, be sure to add the water first, not second, or else you're going to have a foamy mess. And once she does this, she's chosen the clear bottles so they look pretty. So it also looks better than like a Dawn dish soap thing on the side of your sink. It's just a pretty bottle with a spout. As I said, this has made her dishwashing liquid use go down to a bottle a year. I go through 4 bottles a year. I wonder what it would do here. And the funny thing is, I don't need to do it with the bottle, guys. I have one of those sinks with the pump. I could totally water that liquid down. And the way I do dishes, that would actually make a huge difference. So I'm going to try that one here. It's no extra effort. I'm going to use my built-in spout in my sink. And the way I do dishes is I put soap on a sponge, and I tend to wash them as I go, usually rather than big sink loads, unless they're in the dishwasher. So I can see how that would totally do it. And just as a reminder, frugality tips are something you want to build into your life that don't take a lot of extra time. I'm surprised nobody has contacted me with the homemade laundry detergent one yet, but I'm sure it's coming. I don't know which one of you is sending it, but one of you probably is. Anyway, that's the frugality tip of the week. Shopping report is next. This comes from Joe, who has been doing a weekly shopping report on our MeWe group for a long time. And he started in, I think, 2020 when things started going up, up, up. And I think at the high point, a 2x4 was close to $10 for a 2x4x8. So he's been comparing some of the same things, making comments about if the shelves are full or what's missing or what's hard to get. I find that perspective really helpful because when we talk about, sky is falling shortages, it's like, okay, but what's the reality out there? What's it really like out there? And I'm somebody who doesn't shop once a week. So it's fun for me to just kind of live vicariously. This is his report for this week. We are back to doing our shopping on Saturday, partly because in case another trip is needed. So far, I think I've made a second trip only when something happens like there is a specific need or a USPS have failed to make a delivery. The first stop was Dollar General, mostly for cat food and some craft items. We walked around a little more than usual and found the store well stocked. I think I saw limited quantities of some things, but not glaring holes. Second was $1.25 Tree, mostly to look, but I got a drink there. They have decent quantities of second tier, but still well-known brands. Third was Hobby Lobby, mostly sewing stuff. The store was full of merchandise, and we had essentially no wait to check out as multiple lines were open. Fourth was Home Depot. 2x4x8 has dropped to $4.75. Guys, if you have lumber projects, it might be time to start thinking about getting your supplies. Price things carefully. We did not find the bucket of patching goo we wanted. Maybe they've stopped carrying it. Batteries, tools of all kinds, and lumber were all plentiful. Last was Aldi. Stock levels are all good. I'm not sure that anything changed significantly. Our particular combination of items did produce a higher bill than we've had lately. The last time I filled up, untainted regular was $4.89 a gallon. So that at its high point was $5.09 this year. So it has dropped a little bit, and that's pretty cool. What is not cool is grocery prices are going up. And if you look at the consumer index specific to groceries, they say that grocery prices have gone up at a higher rate of inflation than the official inflation rate. So I'm not surprised to hear prices are higher. Apparently nothing struck this person or Joe as this thing is what caused it, but it could just be across the board. And I'm sorry, guys, that makes it harder to double down on your pantry development. Sucks. Next segment is Operation Independence, where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lifestyle here, as well as finding ways that make sense from a time ROI standpoint to reduce the need to call a guy and pay a guy to do a thing. And I mentioned on Friday that we were getting LGDs. And I just and we were not being charged for these, which is kind of amazing because LGDs are expensive. Free dogs are never free. It's like free kittens are never free. There are always expenses. So I will find out today how much we are spending on the LGDs, but I'm thankful we didn't have to also spend a couple $100s for them in addition to buying, I'll just put it out there, more fencing, because goats aren't enough. LGDs like to get out too. So that has happened. Free dogs are not free. However, dead sheep are a problem. So we are moving forward with the LGDs. We're training them. I don't know how to train LGDs, so it's a learning experience for me. I have somebody coaching me who did not tell me a key piece of information, but now I know. So we're taking steps to deal with that. And both LGDs are here. And one of them is pretty skittish. The other one I've already taught to walk on a leash, and we're working on sit. What I'm doing with these dogs is orienting them towards the sheep, but also teaching them kennel training, to go in a kennel, to ride in a car in case I need to take them to the vet, and basic dog commands from me so that If I need them to leave it, they will leave it. If I need them to come, they will come, and they will come by their name. If I need them to sit, which is a really good way to just redirect dog energy, they will sit. All of the things that you would teach a normal dog, we are teaching these dogs, and they have not been taught this, and they are 8 months old. Enough said. Makes me need to take a good stiff pull from this here bottle of fizzy water. It's fizzy spring water. I have a what's that called? Soda Stream. And it's hooked up to a 20-pound CO2 tank. And that means we get a lot of fizzy water here. I love fizzy water. It's part of one of my strategies for not drinking crappy soda pop or too much alcohol is my fizzy water is like my treat. And I can have a treat anytime I want with zero guilt. It's awesome. The next thing I want to talk about is the Homestead supply sale. One of the ways that we are getting ongoing local revenue here is that I became aware I have a bunch of stuff I'm not using, like the aforementioned crock that just occurred to me when I was talking on this podcast, and I have not listed for sale yet, but it's about to be listed for sale. And what we're doing is the things we know we're not going to use that still have good life left in them. Like we have 3 fence chargers for sale that are 110 instead of 12 volt, right? Because we're running fences off batteries now because of where the sheep are. And I have 1 fence charger plugged into my grid system here that will do the entire property. So now we have 3 extra fence chargers we don't need. Those are for sale. So we're selling things like that and just putting them out there in the Homestead network and then using the money from that to further augment things like LGD expenses, and I want to get a solar array going on the sheep so we can both run the fence on solar, recharge the batteries there, and then also as a backup be able to take a battery here, plug it into the grid and recharge. What we've been doing so far is every day a battery comes here, one goes there, one comes here, one goes there, one comes here. There are 2 batteries in the system. If anything comes up to interrupt us and we forget, and it takes a while to charge a battery, guess what happens? There's no battery. We have to trick the sheep. Well, with the LGDs now, we really do need the fence working. Plus, the sheep kind of figured out that sometimes the fence is off, and those little buggers are smart too. So you got to watch it. Anyway, that's what's happening here. We have just sort of a surplus, getting rid of it. LB, the stud boar, needs to move on to a new farm soon. I think we're getting baby pigs soon. So if he does not move before Mama gives birth, we're going to have to separate them into 2 paddocks because she's not going to want their fighting stuff will happen. So, in fact, I need to look at my calendar and see when she's due specifically because I'm pretty sure I know when the deal was closed on that one. So if you need a boar, he is half Idaho pasture pig and half Duroc and confirmed able to close a deal and get somebody pregnant. Very good genetics, makes big pigs. He's a big pig. Nice little guy, LB. He's looking for a new lady friend. He could be your pig's boyfriend. You just got to reach out to me. Anyway, we're doing that, and that does bring revenue in when you purge things. I think the trick to selling stuff is not to overprice it. A lot of us think our stuff is worth a lot more than it really is. And so we've really been looking at like, okay, I try to go at least half of retail to start out with. Sometimes when I just want to get rid of something, it's just like $10. That's the way it is. So that's what we're doing here under Operation Independence. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, Homestead Bootcamp. Doesn't that sound fun? So we decided to do Homestead Bootcamp here, which is to bring somebody on property to work by our side and learn some of the things that they have been wanting to learn as they build their own property out. So this is somebody who already has land, has lots of plans. They're building it out. They're like, it'd just be easier to go do it somewhere else. And the way this came to be, it was at our poultry processing workshop. One of the participants walked up to me and said, what I really want to do after seeing this is just like be here for a couple weeks, follow you around and figure out how you do all this stuff so I can avoid some of the mistakes you made and I can figure out how to get these processes going at my homestead. And I was like, Dang, that's a good idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that. It's a perfect mentoring opportunity. We have a functioning homestead. We make mistakes. Some things go well, some things go poorly. The thing about homesteading is you kind of want to know what that looks like. It actually is a great idea if you're thinking of doing a homestead, because you can see what it really looks like, especially if the person who invites you in lets you see the hard stuff. There is nobody I know in homesteading who does not encounter hard stuff. People who've been doing it for 20 years have less hard stuff, but they still have hard stuff. And a lot of people don't talk about it, but if you don't talk about it, people don't realize that sometimes you come out to your goat herd and a coyote ripped the face off your goat and your goat's still alive and you have to deal with that. Even if you don't like killing animals, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to heal that goat? Like, what are you going to do? I know somebody who had that happen. The LGD actually did it to their goat. And we tend to kind of gloss over that part because we also emotionally want to put it behind us, but that stuff happens. But I think on a more realistic day-to-day basis, I'm not somebody who grew up in homesteading. I'm doing this like for 15 years now. Sure, I know how to do stuff that other people don't know how to do. I'm really good at some things, and I try new things every year. And because I try new things every year, some of it goes really smoothly and some of it does not. The sheep have, like, no regrets on the sheep. Sheep have not gone smoothly. We planned it all out, we learned some stuff, we got the sheep, and oh my gosh, that's more work, right? So that happens to all homesteaders. If anybody's actually out there doing it day to day, trying to live off the land, like, struggles come up. You get the locusts in one year or whatever. The squash vine borers come in all the time over here. There's all sorts of stuff that happens. And so when she suggested this to me, and I was like, well, I have this house about to be an Airbnb, so there's somewhere somebody could stay for a very limited window. I was like, well, let's give that a try. Because if we set up by example and talk about it, what this could really look like from a mentoring standpoint, maybe other homesteaders will hear this and then they will emulate, right? And if they emulate it, then more people have access to learning these things. And the other thing that happened at the chicken processing workshop is one guy came and he's like really motivated to learn how to grow his own food and all of that. He came to the processing class to learn a skill. He feels like he's been beating his head against the door, trying to get people to respond to him to show him how to do this stuff. I think he's even willing to pay for it. And he just can't find an outlet for it. And so he showed up. He was super eager to learn everything and to do as much as possible. That kind of a person, if they can sign up for a Homestead Bootcamp somewhere, starts getting a foundation, and that's a big deal. Now, here's why I haven't done something like this before. Bringing people onto my property and showing them takes a lot more of my time than just doing the stuff. A. B, a lot of people who reach out to me to say, hey, I want to learn how to do this stuff, have no idea what they are getting into. And they have this vision of what homesteading is, and it's not like summer camp. Like, I almost called this homestead summer camp. I think I have a time or two. It's really more like boot camp. It's work. And they're like, hey, I'll volunteer to work on your place, and then you just give me somewhere to live and feed me and show me how to do all this stuff, and that'll be cool, right? No. That will take me more work than doing my own stuff and then cost me money on extra food. It actually costs me to show people stuff. And then if somebody shows up under an agreement like that, what I have found is that the labor trade never works out. What works better is you will pay me rent, and then you can work off the rent. That's how I've done that for people who have, who are doing a labor trade. And that kind of offends people sometimes. But the times I've done that, there's very clear documenting of value for value exchange. Like, I gave you this rent, you did this many hours of work. Better yet is when it's like you've accomplished this thing, right? So the reason I decided to go down this road was I thought, well, here's somebody who has put their money where their mouth is, come to a poultry processing class, never processed an animal before in their life, gone through all of it, right? And that's not an easy thing, especially for some of us who are timid about dispatching an animal and blood and guts. And they're saying, hey, I'd like to come learn more stuff. I believe this person will learn stuff. So for me, there needs to be some element of, I think this person will really do it, right? Because I don't want to bring somebody out here and then they're just complaining the whole time, or it wasn't what they thought. Part of why I'm telling the story is so people understand what it is, right? And I thought, okay, we'll give this a go. And she was like, how much? I'm like, you know what? We've never done this before. Come out, stay here. We'll do Homesteading Bootcamp. You pay me what you think it's worth at the end of it, because there's no way I even know how to set a price for that. I can make up like, this is how much of my time it takes, that sort of thing. But I want to know on this one, is it valuable, right? So here's what I hope to achieve with this. I hope to have a system in place for future Homestead boot camps and a better idea of how many people we can boot camp at once. So my thinking is we're going to have one person here plus a second person who we know coming in from time to time on things she also wants to learn. And 2 people is a good number of people. Can we do 5, or is 5 too many? Is it better one-on-one? Is it better family? You know, if it's a husband-wife team or whatever, or a husband-husband team, I don't actually care. People who live together or live nearby, like the Holler neighbors, does that work all at once? Does it need to be somebody who's kind of in the same place? We will find that all out as part of this. The second thing I hope to achieve is to be a model for other homesteaders to offer this sort of thing and have an idea of how to set it up. Now, I'm going to learn what went well and what did not go well in how we set this up as we move forward. But if we can start a network of this, guys, we can kickstart a bunch of people who are aspiring homesteaders to avoid some of the pain of the first 2 years, right? When I started homesteading, Google didn't work right. It doesn't work right again now. But like, there was a period of time around 2010 where I could like look on Google and find information about anything. And then by like 2014, you could look on YouTube and actually see it happening in video. That was pretty badass. But when I first started, I had the Encyclopedia of Country Living by Carla Emery, and that is a great book. That tells you like all the things. But I had words in the book. And I don't know if you know this, but Mother Nature doesn't read books. So I had to figure it out. And I had this grand vision of being a modern model homestead with all sorts of automation, because I know how to program websites. I should totally be able to program chicken doors to open and close. And by the way, that's harder than you think it is. Now you can actually buy a product that just does it, because somebody figured out people who think they're smart and aren't smart enough to do it sometimes just want to buy the solution off the shelf. And then there's the thing about investing time. So what I hope to achieve is that we can start establishing a mentorship network, a mentorship program for people who are driven to learn how to live from the land, how to get value from their land, homesteading style, whether they live on a half-acre city lot or a 65-acre farm. I think this could be really awesome. And I know that Paul Wheaton is doing something similar where he's permaculture certifying or boot camping people for a much longer period of time. So this is how we prepared for this. We didn't. I'm going to say that again. We didn't. I thought the most important thing as I went into this weekend, knowing that we need to cover specific things, was that I not do any special staging, cleanup, moving of things around, changing of habits, none of it. We're leaving things as they are, because what I want for this person to experience is what it's like on my homestead. And what it's like on my homestead right now is that we've had 3 very tough weeks. As a result of 3 very tough weeks, not everything is put away where it goes. There is stuff under Taj Mahal. A, there's a pile of boxes I'm supposed to fill up with stuff I'm purging. But B, last night, after what happened yesterday, and we had quite a day yesterday, it was 9 p.m. It was dark. All the animals were taken care of. 1 animal was lost. And we had resigned ourselves to the fact we're not finding that animal tonight. Tactical hadn't eaten yet, but the brisket was available. And he had fists full of tools, containers, weed whackers, and all other stuff related to sheep fencing that needed to be put away. And he took this stuff and he did this. He threw it on the ground or on the table. I'm not sure. I haven't even looked where he threw it. And this morning when I talked to him, I was like, we're not doing any special cleanup for this because I want her to see what happens after 3 weeks of chaos and what it looks like and how we have prioritized things. And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's not happening. He's like, I just dumped all of my equipment under Taj Mahal, which he's not supposed to do, by the way. Because I was too tired last night to deal with it. And I was like, I can't even fault you for that, dude. But so we just, I think he's picked up. So I saw him wandering around with a weed whacker out my window a little while ago. He's handled some of it on his normal schedule. But right now we have priorities for today. And priority number 1 is LGD compound development. Because what happened yesterday, 2 new dogs came here. We had them in a fenced area with electricity that should have kept them in, and it didn't. They got out. None of my animals died. I'm a little worried until they're oriented with my dogs, that my dogs will be killed, right? Or his dogs will be killed, or Nighthawk's dogs will be killed. We also had Jenny in visiting, so her dog was here. I was like, oh, great. So the one time we have like extra chaos, the dogs get out. And we could only find one. And they had only been here for half a day. So they're not really oriented to my place. So we were looking for the stupid dog who did not come. And so we contained the other dog, and in the morning, the other dog was back. So we were lucky. We didn't lose that dog permanently. And then I talked to my advisor, and they were like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, you either need to lock them in a barn or a kennel or make this kind of thing out of electricity and cattle panels. So Tactical's first stop this morning was Tractor Supply for some cattle panels. So we're making this whole different, stronger pen than the one we made that they got out of, because LGDs can dig, they can climb, and apparently there was a gap in the fence I didn't know about that they totally found when we were orienting them towards the sheep. So how we were prepared is that we did not prepare. We did not stage. We're going to let her see what it really looks like. A typical program, though, this is what a typical program looks like, is we have a conversation in advance, establish what goals. So when she reached out to me, I said, but what do you want to learn? And she said, well, I'd like to know how to make garden beds better. I want to understand how to manage poultry. And I'm really interested in what you're doing with the sheep. And so I said, great. Do you want to learn food preservation? She's like, that would be nice too. But really, these are my 3 things. And I said, okay, so what we have organized then for this week. So we did a little bit of preparation. We put off making a garden bed till this week so she can help us make the garden bed, and she can see how we set up a new garden bed from Tennessee weeds, which are as tall as I am. And we made sure that we have something to show her on the poultry. We raise ducks. She's going to raise chickens, so it's a little bit different. It's a different animal. I have 1 chicken here. And then we have all sorts of sheep projects, but what she's going to see is how we're also handling the LGDs, because that's what's happening this week. And along the way, if I get enough of a harvest to preserve something, I'll show her how I can stuff. But basically, a typical program looks like pre-talk, set goals, arrange a time where we can all do it, which took us a while for everybody's schedule to work out. This is literally the only 3 days I could do it in August because I'm going out of town next week. And I need to be here, and Tactical needs to be here for this to happen. And then I sat with Tactical, and I'm like, okay, day 1, what are we doing? Day 2, what are we doing? Day 3, what are we doing? With the caveat that things will change if things change on the homestead. Because sometimes you respond to stuff on the homestead. And when you're integrating new animals like LGDs, things change faster. When she gets here today, we will have a conversation again about her goals and just double check that we're all in alignment. And then this afternoon, we'll start with the sheep, because the sheep are going to need a new pasture tomorrow. So Tactical's doing the fencing today, and she can understand better how the step-in posts and the electric fencing and all of that goes. And then also at the same time, that allows them to be near where the LGDs are, who are orienting towards us as humans and that. So it's actually a pretty good fit. The weather looks like it's going to cooperate today, so we can do that. Tomorrow, I believe, is garden bed day, which is kind of crossover with the poultry. And then handling poultry isn't that hard. So we'll knock that one out. She's only here for half day, whole day, half day. Because when she told me her goals, I was like, we don't need 2 weeks to do that. We need maybe 3 days. And it's whittled down to 2 days. We're going to get done what we can get done in 2 days. And I think for me, that's a really good amount of time, because we can handle all the meals, because I'm going to cook meals too. We can handle that. We can handle having somebody on the homestead. We can, be social and show all the stuff. And then there's still a break before I go out of town. And it's a good amount of time for her to have to actually get a flavor for what it looks like here. So that's what a typical program looks like. I think 3 days would be my maximum amount of time, unless somebody convinces me something different. I think it's actually like even just a full day, 1 day would be good if we have very tight goals. An overnight and is sometimes good to see the next morning, but that's the thing. So the 3 things we're covering, as I said, is poultry, sheep, and the garden bed. And then anything else that comes up. She is just going to see all the random stuff that happens when you're on a homestead. The rabbits need this, or the garden harvest needs that. I will be doing harvesting for sure, because I didn't harvest this weekend like I was supposed to because of all the stuff that went on. And I need to do a really good deep harvest before I go out of town for a week, because I'm pretty sure while I'm gone, 0 people are harvesting. I might actually get tactical to pick some tomatoes off my tomato wall and put them in the fridge. But other than that, I don't see him going through and picking beans off my bean row, for example. So we'll get in there. And of course, because of the last 3 weeks, my gardens need to be weeded again. They're not as bad as they were like when I started Garden 30. But there is stuff coming up that needs to be gotten rid of. I need to check the squash there. There's probably a cucumber as long as my body is at this point, because it's been 3 days since I picked cucumbers. And those things, when they come on, they're just like, I'm a little cucumber. I'm a big cucumber. That's what cucumbers do. It's kind of fun. And this year, my cucumbers didn't get all hosed by pests, although those things are coming. In fact, I'm going to get yellow squash this week. I'm super excited about that. I might bring some to my friend up in Maine. It's a great idea. So we're really trying to show both a methodical approach to what we do, because we do have a methodology, we have a schedule, but also that we have to flex from time, depending on what the weather is doing, what the animals are doing, what comes up that doesn't go as we planned, what comes up that does go as we planned. Sometimes things go faster, sometimes things go slower. I want to show her the actual chaos of a homestead, and I'm super excited about that. So I really do hope this has been a fun episode for you, that it sparks some ideas of things you can do on your homestead, or if you're aspiring homestead, of ways you might approach people who could do a homestead boot camp with you and say, listen, can we do a day or a day and a half where we focus on this 1 or 2 things, rather than I don't know where to start, what am I doing, right? Because a lot of us come and we're like, I don't know where to start, what am I doing? And then the homesteader's like, I don't know how to help you. Okay, well, I want to learn about poultry. Could we do a half day where you show me from morning until noon what you do with poultry? And they'll look at you funny, because they'll be like, well, I let them out and I collect the eggs and I wash the eggs. And if anybody's sick, I deal with that. And then I don't do anything else. Well, you need to see that. And then you can ask them about their watering system, and you can ask them about how they store feed, and you can ask them about what happens. Are they doing the deep litter method or not? Are they rotating them through in a tractor, or are they doing free range? Or are they doing something else, right? There are a lot of things that you can do, that you do with your poultry homesteaders, that you don't realize somebody might want to know about. Like here, if you come talk about our poultry, we're going to talk to you about 3 watering systems we have tried that sucked, and why we're using this slightly less sucky system now, right? We don't have an ideal system. And Tactical can tell you why, and he will tell her why while he's here. We had a really great one with a 55-gallon drum and all of these places where the chicken that broke at about a week. broke because chickens are heavy and they like to roost on their freaking water things. Yep. Anyway, those sorts of things really do help people not spend a lot of money on crap they don't need. And that's why I'm excited about this. I'm hoping that I've equipped y'all with a way to talk to each other about doing the same thing. With that, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. 2, consider becoming a member. Just head over to livingfreeintennessee.com. Click on membership to sign up. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. Okay, I just wanted to have that pause in there before I hit y'all's questions on the live feed so that I don't lose my mind doing the audio editing later. So I've got four comments or questions that came up, and we'll go over those, guys. If you want to get a comment or question in while we're still live, just put the first few things in all caps. So this is one from Josie. And look, this is a perfect example of how to make it so I star your comment for later, because there are enough comments going on that I'm like, I can't keep up, but especially while I'm like thinking about Homestead Bootcamp. My favorite dish soap is Smiley Suds from Azure, standard 15 for a gallon. I'm going to try watering it down. Yeah. So watering down, I think, works best if you're not doing like sink loads of dishes. I find when I do sink loads of dishes, if there's watered down soap, that I just use more to get the number of suds I want. And that's just me. But I love that idea, especially for the way I do most of my dishes, is just by dumping it on the sponge and then going from there. I did a bunch of dishes that way yesterday because I was trying to keep up on dishes while also canning, while also LGD stuff was going on. So I was like in and out trying to keep going. And what you don't want is like at the end of a canning day, dishes stacked to the ceiling. It's not fun. And then of course I'm always cooking in these big pots when I'm doing canning. So they're not stuff that fit in my dishwasher all that well. And it's kind of a waste. So I end up washing those by hand most of the time. Okay, Josie has a second comment here. The lumberyard lets me haul off their cut scraps. We've been able to build some cool stuff with that free lumber. That's a really good frugality tip right there. It's amazing what you can find as you get to know people in your community, because there's a lot of stuff being thrown out that you could use. That's just a thing. There are, people buy the IBC totes, right? And the IBC totes cost, $25 to $150, depending on where you get it and if it's food grade and how clean it is and what time of year it is and how popular they are. Well, usually the people selling the IBC totes, if they've gotten it straight from the factory, didn't buy them. They were given those just to get rid of it. In fact, I know somebody who does barrels who what they had to do was buy a way to store them at the factory where they're getting them from so that they make it easy for the factory to just put them somewhere. And they did that. And so they get it for free, but they had to buy a storage container, right? And that costs money. And then they sell the barrels and that offsets the storage container and eventually has turned into profitability for that person. That's actually the person I'm thinking of. Got through 2020, they were in a restaurant related business, got through 2020 because they figured out they could do this barrel thing. And that's what actually got them through. So, it's funny. Once you have your own thing and problems come up, you become really good at spinning something else up really fast. My LGD did a great job with goats and sheep. It killed chickens, even though I had chickens before the dogs and they grew up with them. I have heard that LGDs will orient on specific animals, and sometimes that means that the squawky birds become toys and are a problem. I also know that I know people who have trained their LGDs not to kill the poultry. So I think it's one part training and probably one part temperament of the specific animal. I don't know for sure, but I know that we had one dog here once who could not be taught not to kill poultry. And when he got out, it was a neighbor's dog. When he got out, he would come straight to my property and kill a duck or two. or a chicken, whatever he could get his hands on, because what he needed in life was 150 acres to run around on and just get energy out. And he was designed to kill birds. And I don't think we could have trained that out of him ever. But on the other hand, I have 2 dogs here who killed poultry once and were taught not to. Chestnut, it took 2 times, and Cece, it took 2 times. And there were 2 different things, like a different thing worked for Chestnut than for Cece. Cece responded really well to the electric bird, where you put a collar on, they forget it's on, and then you learn their chase mode. And when the first time they start darting for the animal, you make that bird electric. She got shocked twice and has never touched another bird. She did chase them after that, but she never killed one. And then Chestnut, like, the electric bird kind of threw her off, but what really worked was she killed a duck. And I carried this duck around, cuddling with it and crying for the rest of the day. And I did it in front of her. And Chestnut responded really well to, I made my humans sad. And so, there's lots of different ways. I think part of it's figuring out the thing that works for your dog. And I think it's different for every dog. Can you pressure can previously frozen rotisserie chicken? My canner's in storage, but chickens are on sale now. Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't. I mean, it's pre-cooked, and you usually pressure can raw meat. So if you're going to pressure can rotisserie chicken, you're going to want to add boiled broth or tomato juice to it in the jar, I would think, for flavor. And also that's how pre-cooked meat is done. If it's raw, you don't have to add liquid, because the liquid will come from the bones or from the meat itself. So just be aware of that. You're going to be adding broth to it. You could totally do that. Or you can borrow a friend's canner. It depends on what your goal with that rotisserie chicken is. I like to keep my stuff frozen and just go from frozen if I can. But, I do have a case of beef under my bed from the canning workshop I just did. And I'll be cooking with some of that this month. By this month, I mean the last 3 days of this month, just because that's where if you can the meat and you don't use the meat and you don't learn how to cook with the meat, then you're in that same situation as if you store a bunch of freeze-dried stuff that you got from some fear-mongering prepper group that sells you 2 years of food all at one time of stuff you may or may not eat. You're in the same boat. You don't know how to cook with it. You don't know if it tastes good. You don't know if you'll eat it. I mean, you will eat it if you're starving, no matter what. Well, why not learn how canned meats work into your life? I actually prefer making chicken stew now with canned chicken. So I can the chicken, and then when somebody's sick, I pour it out, boil it for 5 minutes on the way out of the jar like you're supposed to do. And then I add spices and onions and all the things you add to chicken stew. And then that soup is done in 45 minutes. And it's more delicious than if I do an all-day cook. So there's that. I'm trying to figure out whether to stock up on jars and supplies before or after moving. Any thoughts? When are you moving? If I was moving in a month or 2, I would not stock up on that stuff. It will probably become scarce to source like it always does. I like Fillmore, Filmore, for lids. But anything you stock up on right now, you're going to have to move. If you already know where you're moving and you know how much of that kind of stuff you want to have, you can start stocking up on it there. But I'm not a huge fan of stocking up before moving if you can avoid it. And I know that we feel really unstable right now, but even if you can't source it, air quotes, can't source it new, even if it's hard times, usually, I guess I've never been in a situation where I could not find jars. Sometimes I would not be able to find jars of the exact size and wide mouth that I want, but I was always able to find somebody who had a root cellar from the 50s that hadn't been touched, that had a bunch of jars, and I was able to buy those jars. So the only thing I'm kind of keeping my eye on long-term right now are lids. because in 2020 we went through a lid shortage. If more people start canning again, we're going to go through another lid shortage. If there's a supply shortage, we're going to go through another lid shortage, right? So I guess if I was going to stock up on anything, I'd think about how many lids do I think I need? And a sleeve is about, this long, which is about 18 inches long. And you could have a sleeve of narrow and a sleeve of wide, and that wouldn't take up as much room. But jars are hard to move. They break, and they're bulky and they're heavy. And I mean, if you're moving across town, that's one thing. But if you're moving to another state, adding stuff to move is never, never, never fun. Never fun. Okay, last question we have started today is, what feed do you use for your ducks? Do you change it or increase any period before butchering? How do you preserve the meat? I do not butcher my ducks. It's not that I don't want to. It's that I don't have any that they're egg ducks, and I have Muscovies now who are here to reproduce. And when I have too many males of those, I will process those. So as far as feed, I buy my feed from a local supplier that grows their stuff here, and I use a non-soy feed. It is more important to me to be non-soy based than organic. And the fact that they grow all their stuff here makes me actually reasonably happy with their feed, so they're not dependent on a lot of external inputs. That said, they do add a fish-based protein to the feed, to all their feeds, and some vitamins to balance them out. But that's what I feed my ducks. However, ducks are really good foragers, so they hardly eat anything. And especially the Muscovies can just live off the land. Mostly what my ducks eat are frogs that they find, tadpoles, bugs from the grass. In the winter, I end up going through more feed than in the summer, but we hardly feed them anything at all. What I noticed, because I had to go off their normal feed for 1 week because I have to drive across, Tactical drives across the state to get the feed at the location, because it was really hard to source this feed, guys. So he drives across the state, he gets the feed from the farm, and we have one car right now because we're waiting for his truck to come back from the shop, and my other truck is broken. So there wasn't a time he could go that week. So I ended up getting the most expensive organic soy-free feed I could find at Tractor Supply. I fed that to my ducks for 1 week, and the yolks went from the color orange on this like little gas container that just happens to be on my desk to this lighter color yellow of this binder here I need to read. And that was in 1 week. So I didn't realize how important that feed was, because I figured that dark orange was from the grass they're eating on my property. But it turns out the higher quality feed also augments the egg yolks to be a better, more healthy color. And then, of course, because they're getting most of their forage, they're still that yellow is still way darker than the pale yellow you'll get from grocery store eggs. But feed is a huge challenge. And we used to have 2 major non-GMO soy-free sources in Tennessee. Windy Acres Farms was one of them, and MPS Farms is the other. Well, one of them just went out of business because the people who founded it died, and there was a succession plan for another couple to run it, and then they were leasing the land from the family that owned the land, and the family that owned the land in the inheritance changed their mind about the lease and gave notice to cancel the lease. And now that entire store of high quality feed is no longer being produced in our state at a time when we need more feed coming out of the state and less. This is why I have fodder trees in. This is why I'm thinking about how do I feed my animals without having external inputs, right? I'm very lucky I have such a great feed source here in the state, which is MPS Farms, by the way. I'm not trying to hide the name. Don't buy all their stuff, though. No, anyway, I'm really lucky they're here. I'm glad that the introduction was made from Mark Alexander. And I'm super fortunate, even though it's a pain in the neck to go buy the food, that we can buy that feed there, because otherwise I would be dependent on the commercial system. And the quality is not as good. And I don't know if that's just like it's been stored for a long time or what the deal is with that. Or I would have to go to like Alabama or Georgia or somewhere else to source feed. Now, my long-term goal though, guys, no feed. We're doing the best we can to choose animals that don't need as much feed. Pigs are a problem. Pigs are a problem, but they will eat your table scraps. But, you know, you can't have, I mean, there's not that many scraps that come off my table, right? Sheep eat grass, but they need some supplements, but they don't need feed. And that's they need hay. So I buy hay, right? Grass grows. If we have a time when there's no hay, then we reduce the number of sheep and we have more meat in the freezer. So that's how I do feed. And I think probably every state has something you can do. Now, Josie's asking, this is really the last question. Do black soldier fly larvae work for ducks? Yes, they will eat them. They will eat the caterpillars off my tomato vines too. They will eat squash bugs off my squash plants. Yeah, you can totally do black soldier flies as poultry feed. Ducks will eat them, chickens will eat them. They're delicious. Fish will eat them. Not the fly. They eat the larva. So like the life cycle is the larva climbs up and out of their nest and then turns into the fly. My friend David figured out you could just put a ramp up right over the pond and they would fall in the pond before they developed their wings, and his goldfish would eat them and his koi would eat them and his other fish would eat them. So I thought that was kind of brilliant from a permaculture standpoint. Anyway, thanks for joining my live feed today. I will be back on Wednesday at 12:30 with Billy Bond and John Willis. With that, guys, seriously, go out, make it a great week.